that Bach's choice of numbers had everything to do with his tempo and his duration. Professor Tatlow doesn't mention anything about tempo or duration in this book, which is the reason why I did not consider it at all when I was writing my book, because these numbers are meaningless. These numbers are meaningless unless they have a tempo attached to them. Hello, Corey here. It is July 22nd, 2025 as I make this video. And I say that for a reason, because on July 28th, which is this coming Monday, I will be officially publishing this book, Tempo and Duration in the Music of Bach. Actually, it's out now in its digital edition, so you can get its PDF edition if you would like that. Actually, I would suggest both. Have a PDF edition for devices, and then have a hard copy, a nice spiral-bound hard copy for your viewing pleasure, where you don't have to look at screens. Anyway, the purpose of this video is it could be a concerning video for some people or some authors. So let's say I'm an author, okay? I write this book on tempo and duration in the music of Bach. And it's filled with numbers all over the place. Numbers, math formulas, you know, it's filled with numbers. So, you know, and the subtitle here is Uncovering, sorry, I'm reading it, I should know it memorized. Uncovering J.S. Bach's Science of Tempo, Symbolism, and Proportion, okay? Uncovering J.S. Bach's Science of Tempo, Symbolism, and Proportion. Now, let's compare that to this book here. It's called Bach's Numbers. And I'll talk about this book in a minute here. Bach's Numbers. It's published by Cambridge University Press. Mine is published by BachScholar Publishing, okay, where I am editor-in-chief. So, of course, mine is the better book. Mine has spiral binding. So you want mine because this one doesn't have spiral binding. No, just kidding. I guess, you know, you would want the better book even if it doesn't have spiral binding. Anyway, let me get to the point. So we have Bach's Numbers, and let me read the subtitle here. The subtitle is Compositional Proportion and Significance. Compositional Proportion and Significance. Let me read mine. Uncovering J.S. Bach's Science of Tempo, Symbolism, and Proportion. Well, you know, it's similar. That has the word proportion in there. We talk about numbers. So basically, in a nutshell, if you take these two books, if like the layperson just took these two books and looked at them, this one was published in 2015 by Ruth Tatlow, a very well-respected scholar in Europe, mainly a Bach scholar in Europe. I'm not sure even where she lives. I think maybe Scotland or something. So, very well-respected scholar, even more famous than yours truly as a Bach scholar. I mean, in the scholarly world, I guess, you know, because I don't have an academic position, okay? I'm just the YouTube guy. So YouTube guys don't get any respect, but the people in fancy universities like Ruth Tatlow get more respect, okay? And there's about 100 times more footnotes in this book than in mine also, okay? So if you like footnotes, then get this book, get Bach and Numbers. If you don't like footnotes, then get mine. So also it has spiral binding. But let me get back to my point. I know I'm being a little silly here, but what if I were sued for plagiarism? I just thought about that because This is published in 2015, and I just published this in 2025. And there, if the sort of common layperson looked at these books, they would think, oh, this guy, the author of this book here definitely took ideas from this person here. That, oh, there's similar things. There's 1-to-1 ratios, 1-to-2 ratios. Oh, there's numbers, all sorts of Bach planned number ratios in his compositions. She talks about that here. I talk about the same thing in this book. So you can see it looks like that I should have, when I wrote my book, it looks like I really should have been citing Professor Tatlow's research, okay? Because that's usually the way to do it in the scholarly world. But I did not do that for a reason. I don't have any citations of Professor Tatlow's work in my book, none whatsoever, not one. And I don't mention anything about her research in my book. The reason is this, because I knew that in 2015, had I purchased this book and read it and really got into it, that it would have affected my research in perhaps not so good of a way. Or I would have been feeling indebted to Professor Tatlow for my ideas that I came up with, that I came up with those ideas myself. I'm not indebted to anyone. They're my own ideas. And I make it very clear in my book that I came up with my tempo, or my number theory. I came up with my theory of numbers in Bach in 1992. Far, far before Professor Tatlow wrote this book. In fact, she very well could have had her theory also. She probably had her theory, I think she's a little older than I am, so Professor Tatlow probably had her theory of Bach's numbers. She's probably been working with it for more than 33 years. I mentioned in here, I've been working, it took me 33 years to write this book. So this theory that I came up with and proven in my book that have to do with Bach's use of numbers has nothing to do with Professor Tatlow's theory of Bach and numbers. Now, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating book. So if you want, I mean, if you can read this kind of book, it's difficult reading. Let me tell you, it's not easy. It's hard for me to read things like this in these days. I probably could read something like this when I was in college or grad school, but I just don't have the patience for it anymore. I was looking through it though, and there are some really striking parallels between Professor Tatlow's research and my research in this book. Striking parallels. But here's the difference. The difference is Bach used his numbers for something other than just using them in their own right. Okay, so one of the things that I guess the big theory that she proves in this book or shows is this idea, she calls it proportional parallelism. And that's her term, she invented that term, proportional parallelism. And that's a term that Professor Tatlow uses to picture what I use a different term. I call it alpha omega symmetry. So in one of my chapters in here, I devote a whole chapter talking about symmetry, as she does here. She has a whole chapter on symmetry. But we call it different things, and I think it has a different meaning to me as opposed to Professor Tatlow in her book. So if you read this book, it's fascinating. I mean, if you can get through it, it's absolutely fascinating, and I agree with a lot of it, not all of it. But it's a great book, and I would highly suggest you getting it if you're interested in Bach and numbers. But here is the deal: Bach Bach had a reason for his numbers. And the reason, okay, I'm turning to page 137 in Bach and Numbers here. If you have the book 137, Professor Tatlow analyzes the numbers of bars in Bach's first violin sonata, his G minor violin sonata here. Now, this happens to be one of the major works that I actually analyze in chapter 5. So in chapter 5 in my book, I introduce the readers on how to use this analytical system that I've developed, and I choose 7 key works. And one of those key works is Bach's first violin sonata in G minor. And I lay out the numbers and measures very similarly to the way she does here. You know, the layperson would think, oh, that's plagiarism because I did a table just like hers on that, you know. But no, anyone can do this, really. So, but the problem is this, and the problem with Professor Tatlow's book and theory is this. Okay, yes, true, this is all true. These numbers match up, they form proportional relationships. But why? Why? That's the question, why? She doesn't, nowhere in this book does it answer why. The only why she can give, or anybody can give, is that the numbers are just intellectually stimulating or something. Or God, you know, or they're in God's plan. You know, God invented the numbers. Of course, that's what I say in my book too. That's, you know, it's not a revelation that, you know, if you believe in God, God invented the numbers. Okay, so let me see if I can put this easily and succinctly. In my book, I show that Bach's use of numbers has to do with Bach's desire for a certain duration in time for his composition, like 4 minutes. Okay, so you can take this violin sonata, yes, true, yes, true, yes, true. This is all true, what she says. But if you take my analysis, it goes light years ahead of that, light years ahead. I actually apply actual tempos, like 1 tempo for each movement. I find the natural tempo for each movement, and voila, from those natural tempos come Bach's plan unveiled. We uncover Bach's plan, his durational plan. In other words, Bach wanted the first movement, the adagio and the presto, to be equal in duration. He wanted those to last 3 minutes and 40 seconds with repeats. And then he wanted the fugue proper with its short ending there. He wanted that to last 4 minutes and 48 seconds. And then he wanted the Siciliana after that, between those, to last 2 minutes and 24 seconds. So you can see that the inner 2 movements are at a 2-to-1 ratio, and the outer 2 movements are at a 1-to-1 ratio. And this is absolutely mind-blowing when you consider my analysis in my book. It actually tells us exactly why Bach used those numbers. He used them because he controlled not only his numbers for just numbers' sake. He controlled them because Bach controlled his tempos and his durations. Bach knew his tempos. He knew what tempo he wanted for the composition before he wrote his composition. He knew his tempo. He knew his time signature. Therefore, he could figure out very easily how many measures it would have to be whatever length of time he wanted it to be. That's the only way that Bach could have achieved all of these spectacular ratios in thousands of works. I go through Bach's complete works here. I have tables for his complete works. Complete. I show, without a doubt, unequivocally, that Bach's choice of numbers had everything to do with his tempo and his duration. Professor Tatlow doesn't mention anything about tempo or duration in this book, which is the reason why I did not consider it at all when I was writing my book, because these numbers are meaningless. These numbers are meaningless unless they have a tempo attached to them. Bach wanted something out of them. Bach did not just do things just for the sake of numbers, but Bach also controlled his time durations, the length of time of compositions, and the speed at which his compositions were performed. And this is the system that Bach had. So really, if I'm correct, okay, if this is correct, then you have to just throw this book away, because the numbers are meaningless here. If I'm correct, then this is not correct. But if this is correct, I can also be correct. They can both be correct. So you see that my theory, I don't know how else to say this. I know I'm going to sound arrogant. My theory is better than her theory. That's all I'm going to say. See you in the next video.